Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be working on my 2013 Jeep Wrangler, and we're going to be changing out the front axle U-joints. So I'm going to show you everything that's involved in changing those. I'll also give you my torque specs. So let's take a look at the U-joint and see why we're changing it. So there's not supposed to be movement in this axle or in the U-joint. Looks like I'm missing a clip here and there's movement. So I'm going to show you how to get this job done. That way you can do this at home in your garage. Definitely one thing that will make this job easier is using a press like this. I've got another video of me doing it without the press, and I'll post that right here. But using this press will literally make this job so much easier. And then I've just got an assortment of tools. One thing you will need is a 21mm socket, and you will need new U-joints. The other thing you'll need is a 36mm socket for the axle nut. First thing we're going to be doing is jacking up the front axle. Take a little bit of weight off the tires, and then I'm going to be grabbing this 36mm socket and loosening up the axle nuts. It's easier to do this now with the weight of the tire preventing it from spinning. And then we're gonna do the same on the other side. And now that you got the axle nuts loose, you can jack up the front of the vehicle. I'm jacking it up on the center of the axle, and then I'm gonna put 2 jack stands on each end of the axle. And make sure you have tire chucks on your rear tires. And I still leave the jack under the axle just for extra stability. And now we can take off the tires. And if you've got a wheel spacer on here, you can remove that also. So next we're going to be removing these 2 21mm bolts. There's one here, and then there's one lower. That way we can remove the caliper and put the caliper up out of the way. And then we're also going to be removing this axle nut. We already broke it loose, so we just need to remove it. And it does make it easier to turn the steering wheel. Break them both loose, and then you can use a smaller wrench. All right, so if we look closely on this U-joint, you can see it is actually cracked. It is not supposed to have that much wiggle room. Now we can fully remove the axle nut. I'm going to do the same on the other side. The next bolts we need to remove are going to be the 3 wheel bearing bolts. There's 1, 2, and there's one over on the other side here. I'm using a 13mm 12-point socket, and that fits right on there. I'm not going to remove the bolts fully. I'll leave some thread still in here. That way, if your vehicle's real rusted, you can use a hammer and you can tap on the head of this bolt to push the wheel bearing out. So now we can remove the wheel bearing. I'm going to tap in the axle here a little bit. That way the axle doesn't come out with the wheel bearing. You can see it's already separated. If your vehicle is real rusted, you might have a tough time doing this. Bring the dust shield with you. Be careful with your ABS line. And just set it aside. And then now it's time we can pull out the axle and change the U-joint. And just like that, it is out. Everything still looks straight. Nothing's bent. So now we can bring this over to the press.
I will be showing the passenger side U-joint, not the driver's side for this video.
So here we're going to be hitting out these little C-clips. So we're going to start with removing them all before we use the press. And mark the inner and outer shaft, that way they stay oriented to each other. And here I'm using a socket that's bigger than the U-joint cap. That way I can push the U-joint out of the axle and towards the socket. Right, so now we're going to go ahead, set this on the socket. That way we can push it through. And if it's not moving, I like to give it little taps. This cap's still in this ear. This cap on the other side is about to fall out. I'm going to use the hammer to hit this part down. That way this part doesn't fall all the way out. And this cap's still in there. The other one should be ready to come out. Got to be gentle with it because we're going to save it if we can, or if the condition looks good. Looks good. All the needle bearings are all out. So we're going to save that. And again, gently because we're trying to save this cap. And it looks good. Now we can feed this out of here. Let's set this aside. This cap's kind of falling on the inside. It needs to make sure it's going down evenly when we push it down. You can look here and make sure this is even as it's going down. And it looks like it is. When I did this before, I actually had to grind a little bit off of these ears because the new U-joints were not fitting inside. So keep in mind, you might have to use a grinder and grind that off, or else when you're trying to put these U-joints in, it might not go in. So now we can get ready to put in the new U-joints. Wipe off all these parts first, and then we'll get ready to put them in. So this is the one we're going to use as a spare. You can wipe off this dirt, and you can put on the old caps. Make sure the little needle bearings aren't falling out. Just like that, you got a good trail spare. Just make sure you bring extra of these C-clips. So now we're going to put on the new one. Take off 2 of the bearing caps. I like to make sure the nylon's in the cap, that little nylon spacer. This is where you take one of your caps, start to push it in, and then while holding upward pressure on the bearing, because if I let go, it'll all fall out. So now we just got to tap this in. Take a hammer and do it, just to get it started. Then you can take the press it in the rest of the way. But remember, if I let go of this, this is going to fall out. So don't let go of that. See how it kind of fell down? Now you need to make sure you carefully put it back up there. So again, I press this in for this first cap a little bit further than it needs to go. That way when I squeeze on this next cap over here, it's already sticking out so I can get those needle bearings pressed in straight. So then I take my hammer, you can tap it in a little bit. The U-joint can't fall up or down because I pushed this one in extra far. Now we can snap in this C-clip. We'll press this in the rest of the way. Now we can insert the other C-clip. All right, now it's time to move to the other side. You can remove the caps. Look for your marker. Okay, this is where you can take your hammer, tap it in a little bit. That way it gets in there straight. And then you can use the press. Same thing with this, I press the cap in. That way I can insert this one. Also at this time, I'm just gonna do the C-clip right now. Do the last C-clip. Just like that, all your C-clips are in. And the last thing you need to do, probably actually a pretty important part, is you need to seat the bearings. So in other words, you hit each ear down and it pushes the caps outward. As you see how kind of tight this is right now. So I'm gonna seat the bearings. You see how sloppy and loose it is now? That's what you want. All right, now we can reinstall this into the axle. Just be careful with your inner axle seal. Make sure you lift up the end of the axle shaft before shoving it all the way in. Now you can start with reassembly. Make sure you got anti-seize on a lot of these parts, the wheel bearing. And you can even do the axle shaft. So everything is tightened down. These 21mm bolts for the brake caliper bracket, those get tightened down to 120 foot-pounds. These 3 bolts for the wheel bearings get tightened down to 75 foot-pounds. The axle nut is 100 foot-pounds. The lug nuts are also 100 foot-pounds. So make sure you torque everything down appropriately. So let's go ahead and put the tire on. We'll move on to the other side. Alright, so now we are on the passenger side and we're going to be removing the same things. Axle nuts already removed. We need to remove these 2 21mm bolts. We'll set this aside, the caliper. And then we have these 3 13mm 12-point sockets that hold on the wheel bearing. This U-joint might not be as bad as the driver's side. If it's not that bad, I'm going to try to save it and use it as a trail spare. These were replaced probably about 2 years ago. So we're going to take this all apart, and then again we'll use the press to help take it all apart and put it back together. And just like that, you have finished changing out your front axle U-joints in your Jeep Wrangler. Unfortunately, this is the second time I've had to do this, but having a shop press definitely makes this easier. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, thanks for watching.